Thank you very much for having me here at the beginning of my work here in Korea. I'm very happy and proud, actually, to say at the beginning of a talk, a discussion about regionalism, that I'm proud to be European. I'm Austrian, but first and foremost, European. And I think that reflects also on the work which we have undertaken in Europe over the last 60 years. That it is possible to overcome nationalism and brand your own nationality first. So I'm proud to be European, and I'm proud to serve here as the ambassador of the European Union, together with the representatives of our member states. And I think that might be already a lesson in itself for the region to overcome the legacies of the past and to work together, which was not easy in Europe either. It was mentioned, you have to make an effort, and we have just had the 60th anniversary of the European Union, not without difficulties, but we developed, I think, a forward-looking agenda, and I'll come to that in a moment. The European Union remains engaged in Asia, and I would like to make that message also upfront. You can read it in what we have called the global strategy, that the security and the prosperity of Asia and Europe are intertwined, and therefore the European Union also has a stake in the security of Asia. And that's not only words. While I'm speaking, the High Representative, Mogherini, the Foreign Minister of the European Union, she is on her way to Beijing, and she will have a strategic dialogue, and she will meet with the decision makers there, and she will carry the message of cooperation, regional cooperation, interregional cooperation. I will not explain how the European Union functions. That would take me much too long. I can just tell you we have a few hundred meetings a day, so I don't add them up on a yearly basis. A few lessons perhaps to be learned from best practices and experience. In the trilateral context, you are negotiating a free trade agreement. Well, that sounds a little bit like a small one, a minilateral. But actually, 3 of the largest economies of the world are involved. So I think if you were able to conclude that quickly, that would have a strong impact in the times when multilateralism is not valued as high as it used to be. So I think there it could be a good message to be given to the rest of Asia. And here you have the Asia paradox. The Asia paradox, economic relations good, because there are production networks, value chains, it was mentioned, there are free trade agreements, but at the same time, political relations are not as good. But I think what is important, and that's also a lesson learned from Europe, is if you have a solid underpinning on which you can build, you will always have a basis on which you can talk. And I think this is a lesson on which the European Union was built. And it is important to work together, because it's very difficult for one country to carry all the weight, to carry the torch. Nowadays, too many problems can only be solved in working together, especially in a regional context, and therefore you have a lot of work to do in Northeast Asia. If I talk about not only political and economic issues, we have all experienced in the last few days environmental problems. Our eyes were itching. So fighting climate change making sure that there is a sound environment is an issue, and that's an issue where we have to work together in the European context and here in the regional context, and that adds another layer, I think, which is important. So a networked approach in diplomacy, I think this is what is required today, and there everybody of us should make a contribution. When I was preparing for my assignment here in Seoul, I can actually draw on the experience I have gained in the region. I was posted for quite some time in Japan. I go frequently to China, and I'm coming to Korea since 1999 when I was preparing for the ASEM summit in 2000 here. And Korea has always been a bridge between two cultures, and it has added the experience to its own culture. Only open societies enrich themselves. When China was closed, when Korea was closed, when Japan was closed, these countries were weak in the 19th century and they had to change. And I think this historic experience, that should be used in the trilateral context, that open societies, open political systems are not only invigorating societies, but they also make it easier to work together, that you use the historic experience, the mutual enrichment for trust and confidence building, and not in a negative way in finger-pointing what has been done in the past. If we had done that in Europe, we could finger-point forever, because Europe in the 19th and 20th century was part of the problem and not part of the solution. And I think there we have learned our lesson. We have learned our lesson, and that was also recognized internationally. In 2012, the European Union was granted the Peace Nobel Prize. And I think this is also should be an encouragement for cooperation internationally and regionally, and I would say especially here in Northeast Asia. The approaches are different, yes. The functional approach is more the approach of Asia. However, we also have a functional approach. The single market was built step by step. We have introduced the euro. We have introduced the visa-free area of Schengen, step by step functional. But we have also perhaps a more legalistic approach, which is not the Asian way. So do it your way, but I think it's, what is important is just to take up the ideas. You need a system. We have a system of different organizations in Europe. As I said, it's not easy to shoulder everything alone, and therefore it helps that embedded in the United Nations system, you work together in various areas. So the lesson from 60 years of European cooperation is comprehensiveness, economics, politics, and people to people. The global strategy has the approach that not one solution fits for everybody, but we have to adapt for our partners in cooperation. And the Rome program, I think, is a forward-looking program, and I think by the time we have implemented it, we will be more than 28 member states again. In concluding, let me just highlight one of the lessons which I have mentioned. I think what is important, especially in the context where we speak, EU unity has stopped war on the European continent. Once we fought, and now we talk. And I would wish us here in Northeast Asia and the trilateral cooperation, let's talk.